Welcome to Oslo, Norway. This is the Vigeland Sculpture Park. What you're looking at is the work of a single artist, with a lot of helpers, of course. Gustav Vigeland, born in 1869, was a Norwegian sculptor who single-handedly changed the landscape of my hometown, Oslo. This used to be fields, old farmland, and it was given over to Vigeland to create a monument to life, the masterpiece of his excellent career as a sculptor. There are many impressive monuments created by sculptors all over the world, but to single-handedly conceive this, to me it's a rare masterpiece that puts Vigeland up there with some of the best and most ambitious sculptors to ever live. The sculpture installation, which it is often called, is divided up into 4 sections. Let's start with the section that we encounter first while we walk through the park, which is the bridge. The bridge consists of a 100-meter long bridge with 58 bronze sculptures. As is the theme in general for the park, the sculptures on the bridge depict different scenes from life. The entire park has a unifying theme, life itself. Vigeland is not shy about showing the darker sides of life either. Both love, play, hate, violence, and death is depicted here. All the sculptures on the bridge, and in the park in general, have a very unified visual style to them. The figures are quite similar in both proportion and body type. They are squat and square looking. To me, they all read as regular people, regular Norwegian farmers in a way. And I don't think this is for the lack of skill. Vigeland was an excellent sculptor, and in his studio, now museum, which is adjacent to the park, you can see examples of work where he really flexes his skills and really shows them off. He was an excellent modeler of clay. I think the choice of body type is more of a unifying theme to bring the whole park, the visual style of the whole park, under one umbrella, and not have it be a park filled with individuals. These sculptures are examples of all of us and the life we live, not the life of a singular individual. There are, of course, a more cynical viewpoint one can take as well. There's a lot of figures to complete, and perhaps he needed to simplify them in order to complete them in time. Or that most of the figures are perhaps completed with the help of a lot of assistants, and it's easier for assistants if the sculptures are simpler. And perhaps both can be true at the same time. The most famous sculpture in the park is one of the smallest ones, yet perhaps the one filled with the most authentic expression of life. The sculpture is called Sinnataggen, Spitfire in English, or Angry Child very loosely translated. As the story goes, the model Vigeland hired for the sculpture, a little boy, wasn't really interested in modeling that day. But instead of dismissing the boy and his parents, Vigeland sculpted the child as he was. This might be an exaggerated tale, but Vigeland did work from life and is quoted as having said that working without a model was impossible. And in any case, stories make life much more interesting. The, to me, most impressive part of the park is the fountain. The fountain had a long life of incubation, meant for several places in the city of Oslo before finally finding its resting place here in Vigeland's monument to life itself. The fountain consists of 5 gigantic struggling figures holding a giant bowl of water up. To me, the sculpture reminds me of Atlas, but there are 5 of them. In Norway, we have something called dugnadsånd. Dugnad is when a community, a sports team for example, or a group of people come together and work towards a common goal, often for free or for the greater good. I'd say the idea of solidarity and unity is one of the strongest and most valuable ideals in Norway, one that I think this sculpture group exemplifies perfectly. Surrounding the fountain are figure groups in trees and on reliefs. These 2 groups contain 2 of my favorite sculptures in the park. One of them is this little child standing on top of the skull of an ancient beast. I'm not sure how to make anything more metal than that. We have babies flying through the trees, we have young lovers, and we have one of my favorite sculptures by Vigeland in the park, the old woman with the empty stare. This sculpture departs completely from the style the others are depicted in and calls back to Vigeland's earlier work. This woman is old, on the threshold of death, yet she is the one depicted most lifelike and naturalistic in the whole park. Something about that dichotomy triggers my interest instantly. That and the fact that the sculpture is beautifully executed. The perhaps most famous and iconic and most striking area of the park is the monolith plateau. The monolith itself is one solid piece of Norwegian Iddefjord granite. A model was made in clay and cast into plaster, which was then used as reference to carve the 121 figures towering 14 meters or 46 feet tall. The 36 over-life-sized granite figure groups surrounding the monolith depict the circle of life, and the plateau itself can be accessed by 8 wrought iron gates depicting human figures. When I was a young child, we would play and climb around on these massive figures, using them as a playground. Granite was chosen by Vigeland for these figures over marble because the granite would survive the Norwegian climate and especially the Norwegian winter better, and the humble granite better represents Norway rather than the beautiful and sought after marble. When I was perhaps 2 years into learning sculpture, I went to an old retired plaster caster. His name was Jan Kluge. In his studio were old images of Vigeland's studio with progress shots of the monolith being carved. Jan Kluge's father was one of 3 who made the molds and cast the original plaster model for the monolith. And Jan could remember playing around in Vigeland's studio as a young child. Vigeland is quoted saying, "The column is my religion." It's humanity striving upwards for something more. The top of the column is crowned with children, the next to bear the torch for mankind. This park is in many ways Vigeland's legacy and gift to the capital of his home country. A landmark any Norwegian can point their finger to in pride. This was not made by some legendary master sculptor separated from us by time and geography. Vigeland's first studio apartment was in Oslo, a 10-minute walk from my first apartment in Oslo. My grandparents were young children when the first parts of the park were opened in the summer of 1940. Vigeland's magnum opus, a monument to life itself, has inspired generations. It inspired me to become a sculptor, and I hope that now it will inspire you as well. Stay creative, and I hope to see you in the next one.